everyone, and welcome to No Offseason, presented by eBay. I'm Zena.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, we are nearing the end of the first week of college hoops. And there are already some questions this season that have us talking, debating, and just plain wondering what's going to happen. We'll see. And some of those questions, we're going to talk a little bit about that on a new segment that we are kicking off called This or That, where we discuss some intriguing questions about the season and predict what we think could happen. But first, Unrivaled tried to take the spotlight yesterday. They officially unveiled their 2026 season rosters, marking a major step in its expansion with the league, growing from 6 to 8 teams and boosting the player pool to include 54 and 6 developmental player spots. Sabreena, there was a whole show. It was a little bit of a spectacle. Break it down for us. First, how are the teams shifting in 2026? And then, what are we looking at in terms of the roster shakeups from last season?
Yeah, so if you were hoping to just see, a redux of the Lunar Owls or, Rose, you might be a little disappointed because there is a wholesale changeover from the 2025 rosters on Unrivaled. Each playoff team got a chance to keep 2 players. Each non-playoff team got to keep 1 player. And obviously the 2 expansion teams are starting from scratch. So there is a lot of player movement. And on Wednesday, days of the week are starting to blur together here.
I know.
Unrivaled, showcased its new rosters for the 2026 season. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear who the fan favorites are going to be heading into season 2. It's going to be Breeze with Paige Bueckers and Cameron Brink and Dom Malonga, Rakia Jackson and Kate Martin, right? Like this is a team for the youngins. I do love the reuniting of Dominique Malonga with her coach Noelle Quinn, but things have been significantly moved around, and I was hoping we could see the overall draft order. I'd love to know what order coaches drafted what players in. I thought we were going to get that when Unrivaled teased all of the shots of the coaches in the draft room, but unfortunately we only got to see the final rosters. Just whatever. And here we are. We've got
note for next year.
8 teams of 6 coming into 2026.
Okay, all right, and so. Tell us a little bit about, Ben, what you're expecting with this shakeup. I know Sabreena just said Breeze. I could tell that was a fan favorite. It's the youngins, right? It's all these new stars. There's a lot of following from that perspective. But looking at some of these teams, I know there were some comments around Napheesa Collier not being able to get a squad and basically get the Lunar Owls again. Just a little bit of shakeup there. Any teams that stood out for you in terms of how drastic their shakeup was, or another team that could compete with Breeze?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily looking at Breeze as a contender in this league. I think it is a group of primarily young players, plus Ari McDonald.
Fandom, I mean.
Okay, sounds good. We should throw Ari McDonald's name also. She is the 6th member of Breeze, the one non-particularly young player on that team. Yeah, I mean, I think the teams, there's a lot of intrigue as you go up and down these rosters. I think with some of the teams that made the playoffs, they did try and keep some of the core kind of guard big combinations the same. I thought an interesting decision about protections versus non-protections came with the Lunar Owls that you mentioned, Zena. Mm-hmm. That was a team. Napheesa Collier obviously was going to be protected. She is a co-founder of the league wherever she wants to play. Presumably she is going to play. But on that team chose to select Skylar Diggins, DJ Sackman, the coach of that team, and not Alicia Gray. I thought that was one of the more interesting changes, knowing how great of a season.
Minnesota Lynx teammate Courtney Williams.
Also true.
Oh,
but
right.
I guess I go to Gray because of just what a WNBA season she had, being a top 5 MVP candidate or finisher. She goes Alicia Gray to Mist, where she'll now play with Brianna Stewart, Alana Smith, Veronica Burton, Arike Gumbawale, and Lee Yaru, who I think Sabreena and I both are very excited to see how she fits into this Unrivaled format. I think that team is really interesting. And then there were some teams where we saw more continuity compared to some others. So a team like Vinyl, for instance, still has Ryan Howard, Dearica Hamby, and Ray Burrell. The Rose still have Chelsea Gray, Kalia Copper, Lexi Hall, and I believe Azrae Stevens was on that team last year as well. So that's
players.
4 of 6.
And they were the title winners, right? So
that was going to be my next question, was some of these teams actually are bringing back a lot of talent. And it actually made me wonder a little bit more about the multi-year deals. I mean, the draft has nothing to do with the multi-year deals, but just thinking about the fact that it does help if you're going into the draft knowing that someone is signed up for multiple years. So how did that work out? I know we've talked about this and written about this, but I don't think I realized that people had signed to some multi-year deals.
Yeah, so close to 30 players who are taking part in Unrivaled this year are taking part on multi-year contracts that span at least through next season. And so I think it will be really interesting to watch what happens next year. I know we should be focusing on the present. We're already thinking about the present, but I think it's a super fair question, Zena, about how do things change going forward, and do they start to build and create more, I don't know, continuity year over year? Because I do think that was something they really did think a lot about heading into this season. How do you balance expansion, competitive takeaways from what you learned a year ago, and also wanting to build fan affinity, right? And like those fan ties, not just with players, but with clubs. Because I think one of the big questions that I know I have as it relates to Unrivaled and kind of trying to see how they continue to grow from a viewership and business standpoint is this a league where a fan will start to really invest in a particular team? Will they start to care how the Laces do against the Lunar Owls on a Friday night's game or on a Saturday game? Or will they care much more just about how does Marina Mabrey play, or how does Jordan Canada play, or how does Aaliyah Boston play, or whoever their kind of favorite players are? Is this players first? How is that W player that I love playing in Unrivaled, or do you start to build that connection with the actual team? And I think this year, in some respects, they're starting not at square one because there is some continuity, but there very much is a reset going on in terms of how these rosters are constructed. But I think you ask a really valid question, Zena, about going forward. Will there be even more continuity with so many players coming back? And, I do think with the desire to build up the brands and the affinities with each of those teams, the uniforms themselves.
I'm actually really happy you brought that up because, like, one of the things I noticed on the Unrivaled website yesterday when I was, like, preparing for the unveiling of these teams, it was interesting that you could create, and I think it was really cool, but you can create your dream club and Unrivaled. Like, you can go to their website and, like, pull players from the available pool, et cetera. And, like, sure, fantasy is a thing, right? You could do that technically in fantasy and go through your draft, et cetera. But it does feel like right now the focal point is on the individual players and being able to just, like, create your dream team and be able to support them regardless of what club they're with. All up and down my timeline, people were like, dang, I was a Vinyl fan, but maybe I might be, a Breeze fan now, or have to be a Hive fan now, or whatever. And so there might be a little bit of, transitionary fandom between these players as they go back and forth between teams. But Sabreena, there's one aspect that a lot of folks are very curious about, and it is important considering there were a lot of injuries throughout the season of Unrivaled last season, and there were a lot of call-ups, you could say. Well, this year they have a developmental pool filled with a lot of young players. Tell us a little bit about that. Who can we expect to see in that? And then also, how will they be utilized throughout the season?
Yeah, so I'm sure people noticed last year that there were what Unrivaled called relief players who came in and, sort of subbed into whatever team needed an injury replacement at the time. Natisha Heidemann was one of those players. Nalissa Smith was one of those players. Kiki Jefferson, who's not a WNBA player, actually was one of those players. That was nice to see her playing in a American Professional League. But Unrivaled has tried to get in front of that this year by including a developmental pool of 6 younger players who get to, experience all of the benefits of Unrivaled, like get all of the, coaching and medical and physical therapy, and just the experience of being in Miami with all of these other great WNBA players working on their games. And then they're already there in the event that, a team needs an injury call-up. So that's, a group of younger players like Letitia Mihir, Zaya James, Haley Van Lith, Michaela Timpson, Haley Jones, and God, I'm blanking on the 6th person on this list.
Emily Engsler.
Emily Engsler, there we go. So yeah, now if, one of the clubs goes down to 4 players and needs somebody to step in for a game, you don't have to call somebody up and negotiate a contract and make sure that they can come down, right? You already have them there. They're already ready to play 3-on-3. And I think it's just going to be much better for the health of the game. And it's going to be easier for everyone to take account of. I forgot one of the replacement players last year was Benijah Laney Hamilton, who ended up coming and then getting hurt, when she joined. So I think this will just be better for everybody involved. It's an awesome experience for those players to get to be a part of Unrivaled, even if they aren't on one of the A clubs. And I'm sure they'll be used plenty because this is a style of basketball that's pretty demanding. And even though there aren't back-to-backs anymore, I imagine even just absences, right? We saw Sabreena Ionescu go on a bit of a tour and not be available for some games. I'm sure that'll happen for some players where they're just not available for every week of the season. And that's where you get, an opportunity to see one of the younger players step in.
It's very cool to see Unrivaled literally operate like a startup. Like, here are the stopgaps, here are the issues. Like, let's solve for this next year. I mean, this is a really thoughtful expansion, and a really cool like ecosystem that they're creating for and all of the players, but especially these younger players that get that access. Uh, they'll have the access to not only the players, but we saw last year just even, Lisa Leslie being in the building and working with the likes of an Angel Reese and just having these type of folks that are working on the broadcast, et cetera, just around the ecosystem. It's just great exposure. There's another kind of startup league that we got to talk about. We've talked about Unrivaled shaking things up, and now there's another brand new women's basketball league that is on the horizon. It is tentatively called Project B, and it's officially tipping off in November 2026. So they announced this week that Seattle Storm star forward Nneka Ogwumike, also the president of the WNBPA, the Players Association, she's officially signed to this league, and she is the first player to become publicly known to join the league ahead of its launch. Now, with her role as the president of the Players Union and ongoing CBA negotiations, this adds some layers to this conversation, y'all. This is a very interesting development. So we talked about this earlier in this fall when it was first discussed. Mike Vorkunov contributed as well to this. Okay, Sabreena, so you're gonna have to lay this out for us because we've written about this before, but with this new signing, this is adding a little bit of another dimension to this. So what's happening with Project B, and what does Nneka joining Project B mean for this particular league and the sport as a whole?
Yeah, so Project B, on the surface, not a whole lot different than the idea of Unrivaled in that it's an off-season league from the WNBA where players can, get compensated at a very high level and get equity stakes within the league, which is something that Unrivaled offered to its initial players in 2025. And compensation, owning a stake of the business is definitely a big talking point with WNBA players right now as they're engaging in collective bargaining negotiations. So Project B, just to, set the stage, is going to be 6 teams of 11 players. They are playing 5-on-5, so different from Unrivaled in that respect. And the idea is they're going to be playing 7 2-week tournaments around the world. So at cities in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. And even though Nneka is the first player who is publicly associated with this new league, their chief of basketball, Elena Beard, former WNBA player, great WNBA player, has said that they have signed multiple current all WNBA players to their league. So I'll get into the details of that later because I think it demands a little dissection. But Nneka being involved with this league is interesting, like you said, because she is currently negotiating the CBA of the WNBA. I'll say that members of the WNBA Executive Committee or WNBPA Executive Committee are already involved with Unrivaled. First Vice President Kelsey Plum on Unrivaled, Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart are vice presidents of the PA, and they are both co-founders of Unrivaled. So that one of the players on the committee is involved in a separate league. Not new to the process, right? But the fact that Nneka Ogwumike is involved just adds to the complications, I would say, because she is the president of the Players Association.
Yeah. Whew, okay. Also, shout out Elena Beard. Duke legend, by the way. I definitely remember watching her growing up. But went on to do some great things in the WNBA, has a great pedigree. And I think, her at the helm of this, Nneka joining and becoming the public face of this and already speaking out to say it was important to her to be able to get equity in a league, and the money aspect being important as well. Then this gets a little interesting. A lot of folks have a lot of questions about who's investing in this league, the fact that there is this element of Saudi ties to this league. Break that part down. I think there needs to be clarity for what's been reported on those connections.
Yeah, I think there is a desire to have more clarity, and right now there is a lack of clear clarity as to some of those connections. And I think that is just the kind of reality of the state of this league and this business that, had kind of an unusual launch too. If we're going to zoom out and think about it, just to put out a story and to suddenly pop up an Instagram page. And I know there had been rumblings, but I thought that was noteworthy too. But there's a number of notable people in the sports space who are either committed investors or have been named as investors. So Candace Parker, who interestingly also broadcasts Unrivaled games. I think that is an interesting thing to flag. But Candace Parker, Novak Djokovic, Sloane Stephens, and Steve Young, the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback, are all some of the group of investors that people know about. The most interesting, or the one that I think has given people the most pause or points of curiosity, is what is the Saudi Arabia sovereign wealth fund involvement here? That is a big question here, and I know Mike Vorkunov and Sabreena and what they wrote, like they say that one of the league's future partners, Sela, is owned by the Saudi sovereign wealth fund, and we have seen the Saudi wealth fund, the PIF, get involved in other sports, most notably Live Golf, in recent years too, and spark a whole conversation as it relates to sports washing, and how is that country kind of utilizing Western sports to change its public perception and image of the country. I think that is one of the conversations that will be sparked and that we'll look into. I think there is still, Sabreena, I don't know if you want to say anything else about what you understand about the funding of the league, but I think that is really the core question. It is also funded or founded by former Facebook executive Grady Burnett and a Skype co-founder as well. So those are some of the notables who are involved in this project, among others.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to note here is that the public arm of Project B has been very clear to say that there is not Saudi funding into this league.
Right.
But when you have a partner in Sela who is presumably going to be the broadcast arm of your league, like they've talked about streaming games around the world, and like this is an entertainment company that will be helping produce the games. Presumably, I would imagine that's their involvement in the league. Like maybe you're not directly funneling money from the PIF, but you are also using a company that is funded by the PIF to support the business of your league. So I think the distinction is kind of, negligible in my personal opinion. It is worth noting that, Nneka announced her decision to join the league on Instagram, and the WNBPA like reposted her post and was like, Queen Nneka here, right? Like joining the league. So it is something that they are co-signing that she is doing in her WNBA offseason.
And I know that was one of the things that was called out a lot by fans on social media as well, was wondering why would the Players Association, why would Nneka, why would anyone want to be involved in something that potentially has ties to the Saudi Arabia Sovereign Wealth Fund, knowing Saudi Arabia's, human rights violations. And so this is going to be very interesting as more information comes out about the actual tentacles of Saudi Arabia into this league, particularly from the perspective of actually challenging the WNBA and being a product that people want to watch and people want to support. So verdict is still out, but Ben, any last thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think one other interesting kind of, complicating factor or just thing I've thought about as it relates to who is funding WNBA player offseason experiences. Like that is often a question that has come up over the last 10 to, I would say, 15, 20 years as it relates to the global women's basketball landscape, as professional women's basketball players have gone overseas to play in different countries, right? I'm not trying to justify the PIF's potential involvement here or not, but I think it is interesting when you compare it to, say, some of the clubs in Russia that some notable players have played on, right? So you have a club like Spartak Moscow, which is one of the former powers, great clubs in the Russian league and in European competition that has had many of your kind of favorite WNBA players over the 2000s and 2010s played for that club. Well, the owner of that club was someone named Shabtai Kalmanovich. He was notably and famously a KGB spy who, spent multiple years in prison and was eventually assassinated, I believe, in broad daylight because of look it up, I guess.
Yeah.
It's unclear the exact reasons as to why he was assassinated. But like there are figures of intrigue and conflict and controversy that have, he being one of them, have supported women's basketball players' off-seasons experiences and paid them lucrative amounts of money in the past. And now potentially we're seeing another example of that again. And I think that is interesting yet again.
If you're curious about what Ben is referencing, or just curious about what that space looks like, because it's such a great point, check out Diana Taurasi's documentary that I believe is on Amazon. I watched it on the plane. So So on Amazon, she tells the story, Sue Bird tells the story of an owner that absolutely adored them, respected them, gave them all the resources possible. But did they know where that all came from? No. Do they have full clarity as to where all that came from? No. But they did appreciate the space that he created. And so this is where it gets a little bit dicey when you are excited about the growth of women's basketball and you're excited about the fact that people want to be involved, but you do have to protect the integrity of the sport and the integrity of the people that are finding themselves within it. We'll keep you guys posted on all of this, of course. That's our job. I love Sabreena and Ben because they're going to bring the facts, and that's exactly what we need to do when it comes to these type of stories especially. But now, that's enough of this pro WNBA off-season stuff, okay? There's a whole college season that's happening, and we got some good questions, this or that, coming right up. Alrighty, so we got a new segment called This or That, and it's the Women's College Hoops Edition. I'm excited about this. This allows us to talk about a few different things than what we've typically been discovering around this new season that's upon us now. We're going to throw out some questions, and we're going to pick which option we prefer. There are no wrong answers, just our takes, just our observations. So, Ben, I'm going to start with the first one, and I'm going to start with you. Who is more likely to break South Carolina's run at the top of the SEC? Oklahoma or LSU? Or do you have another person or team that you think is going to take that long shot and spice it up?
Well, I want to first say South Carolina, I want to set up just what their run of dominance in this conference has been, because it has been a very long time since they have not won either the conference tournament or a share of the conference regular season title, right? We saw, for instance, in a year like 2021, that is the only time since 2020 where they were not conference regular season champions. However, that year they did win the conference tournament. And if you go back to 2014, it just basically looks like championship in some form or fashion. The odd year out being 2019, a year in which South Carolina did not take home either a conference tournament title or a regular season title. That is the one season in which they were totally void of a championship. So South Carolina, in some form or fashion, been running this conference for about a decade. So to your question, Zena, of who do I think? I mean, look, I think yet again, the SEC is going to be the deepest conference in the country. I think that is what makes it so exciting. And you throw out Oklahoma and LSU. Of those two teams, I personally like Oklahoma as the school to potentially unearth or upset. South Carolina at the top. We've talked about Reagan Beers and what she has done in the past at Oregon State. Aaliyah Chavez is someone we have talked about as well, just among one of the best potential freshmen in the country who's coming in to make an impact. I also like that they do have some experience around her. Sahara Williams, Peyton Verhulst. They have a coach in Jenny Branchek who is a great offensive mind. The long shot, which is not a long shot, is Texas. They're a top 5 team. And frankly, I like Texas over both of these other options as the team to beat South Carolina here. But of the two you have given me, I like OU over LSU, but I like Texas over both of them.
I like both of these, this breakdown. I think Texas definitely has the depth and the continuity to keep going. I think I actually like LSU over Oklahoma, though. I don't know if I like LSU, though, over Texas. This is weird. But I'm just thinking about LSU. One, you got Flaude Johnson coming back. You got Michaela Williams coming back. Mylasia Fulwiley, explosive scores, right? And then you've got this elite defense. They are such a defense into offense, transition type of team. Then you've also got the fact that they've got this experience as well, right? Oklahoma, yes, they found some success recently, but not quite like LSU in the last few years under Kim Mulkey. And I really do think that between having the turnover margins that they have with other teams, making teams feel relentless, they go on runs and completely just weather teams down. I do feel like I haven't quite seen that out of Oklahoma just yet. So I think I might have to go with LSU out of the two of them. But I do like this Texas pick. Madison Booker and Rory Harmon, I'm not counting them out. Sabreena, where are you at with this?
So just to give like the listeners a little peek in, the reason why, when we were framing this question didn't include Texas, because Texas actually won a share of the SEC title last year. I don't know if y'all
That's
remember
true.
the coin flip drama heading into the
Yes.
SEC tournament.
Yes.
Involved Texas and South Carolina sharing, a piece of the SEC title. So this isn't to diminish Texas. It's just who can break through in a way that they haven't previously, which
Mhm.
Texas technically has. I think Ben's right about Texas having the best shot here. I look at the way South Carolina's constructed this year, and they're starting 3 guards this season in a way that they haven't in previous years. Tessa Johnson, Raven Johnson, and Taniyah Latson are forming that backcourt. And I look at that and I think, oh my God, look at the offensive firepower. And also, oh my God, who is supposed to guard Madison Booker, right? Like there's no Bree Hall
Yeah.
here to take care of that assignment anymore. But,
point.
setting aside that because the this or that was Oklahoma and LSU, I think I'm going to stick with LSU too. I think just the combination of effectiveness on both sides of the ball is what appeals to me for LSU more so than in Oklahoma. Their front court is a little bit more unproven, but I look at what Zakiya Johnson's been able to do during the exhibition games and even this first game of the season, and she just looks like the next Anissa Morrow plugging into what LSU is trying to do. And you add that to Kate Colville coming in from Notre Dame to actually give them some size in the front court, and what a Grace Knox can do as a freshman. I just think that there's so much more defensive versatility and just defensive options on this lineup in a way that Oklahoma has just never really proven, honestly, in recent years.
No.
I realized last season was the first season that they moved from the Big 12 to the SEC, so it was a bit of a jump for them in terms of the style of basketball that they were playing. But this is what LSU does. They are born and bred in the SEC. They understand how this works. And admittedly, they have not beaten South Carolina under Kim Mulkey's tenure. It is a hill that they have yet to overcome. To be fair, most teams have not beaten South Carolina during Kim Mulkey's tenure at LSU, right? Texas beat them once. I think the last SEC game they lost before that was to Missouri during December of 2021. So it's been a long time since South Carolina's actually lost SEC games. And to that effect, I think the most obvious answer here is nobody, really. But
yeah,
the firepower LSU has, just the positional versatility of that front court, I think, gives them the best chance, if anyone, to break through.
Do you know what's so interesting, though, about your vote of saying that nobody might be the answer to this question, Sabreena? It's that the coaches in the SEC were asked preseason to rank the finishes for the top 16 teams in the conference. And do you guys want to know who was number one voted by the coaches?
Texas.
It was Texas. It was not South Carolina. And I think that is kind of interesting as, again, you never know who or why a coach is voting the way that they vote preseason, and preseason rankings sure as hell don't mean anything when you get into actual gameplay and we start to see how the season is going. But it is a slightly notable data point just about what some peers around the conference think of this South Carolina program, and maybe about this South Carolina program in relation to this Texas program. I mean, I think what's so interesting, too, about the SEC is you can go all the way down. Vanderbilt, say, is another top 20 program in the AP preseason poll. They're voted number 8th in order of finish by the coaches poll in the SEC. You can make an argument they might have the best player in the conference in Michaela Blakes, right? If you told me that Vanderbilt was one of these surprise stories, significant risers that ends its season in the Elite Eight, I wouldn't be totally shocked, right? That again just speaks to the depth of the conference. That, it's why the SEC is, basically professional women's basketball in training. It's another developmental pool.
We haven't even mentioned Tennessee, who entered the season as a top 10 preseason team, right? Admittedly loses their first game of the season to NC State, but a lot of talent in this conference.
Yep.
And that, I'm not going to lie to you, Tennessee's defense, that full court pressure is actually what made me think of LSU, because I was like, who would I not want to face if I'm on offense? And it's just Tennessee just being all up in your grill. But LSU also has that ability to do that. Oklahoma's perimeter defense, they keep teams pretty low, under 35% from three. That's great. But I'm talking about who is going to make you feel like you are doing a full court drill at all times. LSU, Tennessee, definitely feel that. All right, that's where we're at on the this or that on that. Okay, let's dive on to some younger talent on the court for this next this or that. Sabreena, I'm going to start with you this time because Ben, you started last time. Question is, which team has the better young core? North Carolina or Michigan? And also, obviously, feel free to throw out another squad if you think they're better this or that.
Yeah, so again, the impetus for this was teams that had really good freshmen in 24-25, but who actually does the job of taking the step forward. And we've talked about like how difficult this is, right? Like a year ago at this time, we would have said Iowa State was a clear choice, to take a step forward with their freshman class. And we saw that stagnation is also a possibility, right? It's not necessarily that you're just going to immediately develop in the same track that players developed during their freshman year. So you look at Michigan, you've got Olivia Olson, Mila Holloway, Silas Swords, just a dynamite trio of talent who, scored, I want to say, like 40 points combined per game their freshman seasons. And it's a good group to bring back, especially in a conference like the Big Ten, which has a lot of offensive firepower. And then you look at Carolina, where, they had the likes of Lainey Grant and Sierra Toomey, who I think was a sophomore, but kind of didn't play much her freshman year. And then, Layla Hull, and they're supplemented by Alina Arnasalo, who comes in from UCLA to step into that starting point guard role for the Tar Heels. And, as much as I looked at both of these teams, I kept thinking, like, I hate that I'm just doing the this or that, and like I don't want to pick either of them. But I was just watching Nebraska this week, and Britt Prince, my goodness, a freshman taking a step forward. Like, it's really interesting to think about what that core could do for the Cornhuskers. You've got Prince, you've got Petra Bozan, you've got Amia Hardgrove and Claire Johnson, who I think they combined for 55 points in their first game of the season. Like, wow. That's a good sophomore group there, too. And I think if I'm looking at young cores to take a step forward, like that Nebraska team was a real pain in the butt to play against for a lot of Big Ten opponents last year. And, the way Britt plays, just the pace, which like they run that offense, I think is really interesting. And that's sort of the team that I have my eye on.
Okay. Nebraska throwing us for a loop there. I got to go with UNC for the reasons you laid out, but particularly Alina Arnasalo coming into that mix is really exciting. Like, I still remember her game against South Carolina. I think she dropped 13, but just the confidence with her game. And I particularly remember our friend and co-host of the show, Chantel Jennings, being like, who is this? Like, I don't think a lot of people knew just how crafty she was with the ball, and adding that into this mix with UNC's offense and the fact that they like to run. I think that I'm going to have to choose UNC for my young core. But Ben, what's your this or that? Who are you choosing?
No, this is good. I mean, we don't talk about what we're going to say beforehand. And so I'm going to take Michigan as the trio or the young group that I like the most here. I like you guys going off the board and you going with UNC, Zena. And it is for a lot of reasons that Sabreena said. I mean, Silas Swords being one of them, Mila Holloway, like you saw it in their season opener, and everyone should steer clear of just reading too much from season openers.
Yeah, right.
But you did see kind of a poise and an air of confidence with how she controlled the game. I think she had like 21, 8, and 5. A very good way to start the season. They beat Canisius not many times this season, we'll say. They're going to force more turnovers, 45, than give up points in 40. That's not a ratio that I think we can expect to hold. But I just do like what Michigan can be as this group develops. I mean, Sabreena talked about Swords. She talked about Olson. Holloway, again, they really need to improve on the defensive end of the floor. That was where, among other places, they were, outside the top 100 nationally in terms of defensive rating last year. And so there is a lot of room to improve on that end. Again, forcing 45 turnovers in a non-conference opener is a good sign, but I'm not going to read too much into it. I just like there's a lot of switchability. There's a lot of players on this roster who, are 5'11", are 6 feet, are 6'1". They don't have kind of the 6'5", 6'6" big that you look at South Carolina or Texas, some of the programs, Reagan Beers at Oklahoma that we just mentioned. They don't have that kind of post player in terms of size. I guess we'll have to see. Ashley Solfakanich is the kind of big name to watch there, transferring in from Bucknell. But I just like the versatility. I like the switchability. It is also a Michigan team that has expectations for the first time in a while. This is their second highest preseason ranking in program history. So for a program that you think, should be a potential contender or might have that kind of pedigree, especially in a lot of other sports too, this is new territory. But I like the continuity in this group, and I'm going to take Michigan as the young core I have my eye on.
That's one of the things I love most about Michigan is that they have this very motion-heavy offense because everyone is basically a big guard. But it does expose them on the defensive end. Like, sure, they can switch, but when you're talking about bigs in the paint, being able to back them down, it does leave them a little bit exposed, especially on pick and rolls and things of that sort. But yes, good job, guys. We officially are all on different pages for this one. I like this or that one. All right, let's keep it going.
Can we say too?
Oh, yeah.
Two of notable players with international experience? And I should have said it. Like, I think Swords is someone. Like,
Yeah.
she's someone to keep an eye on. She's only 19 years old, but she is playing, often up with the Canadian national team in a way that so often we talk about the American players. I know Sabreena loves to talk about the U19 ranks on Team USA. I think we value international big game reps here, and she is someone who, has acclimated herself very well in international competition as well.
There you go. Okay, let's get to the, speaking of international, young standouts, North Carolina has a lot of them. Just saying. Liza Astakova, Moscow native. She is one of the top prospects out in Russia. Taisa Quiroz, the Brazilian national squad player. She's played up as well. You never know. I mean, I do like the teams are going off the beaten path in terms of their recruitment. But Silas Swords put everybody on notice last year. She was a really fun player to watch, especially offensively. All right, let's keep it moving to our last this or that. And it is, who's got the best shot at standing out this season? And we're moving this particularly to the mid-majors, okay? Is it Richmond or South Dakota State? Or again, if you got somebody off of these this or that choices, I mean, we've already done it 2 times. Let's go ahead. But Ben, who you rolling with?
Well, we focused on some of these schools and Richmond, South Dakota State, and I would loop some of the Ivies, Princeton and Columbia in here as well if we're going to go off the board. Maybe Sabreena has an even deeper cut that she wants to throw in, because these were kind of either programs that have had recent success that we expect to have success or have some of the highest profile mid-major players in the country. These are some of the teams that we have our eye on. Before I share my answer here, I think one of the great things, I know we don't want to just schedule watch as it relates to how things are going to play out here, but we're going to see a lot of these teams actually play each other. So the answer to this question, we're going to get some clarity to. Columbia, for instance, plays Richmond. South Dakota State plays Columbia. Obviously Columbia is going to play Princeton. Richmond, I mentioned it. They have a very good schedule. They're playing Columbia. They're going to play another mid-major power, Fairfield. So we'll get some clarity here. I'm going to take Richmond, though. They are the highest ranked mid-major of all mid-majors, and they have, I think, the best player who is not a Power 5 conference player. Again, we're going to include UConn in the Power Conference world. I'm not going to let Sabreena get out.
Oh my God, you just took my joke away, Ben.
Yeah, I'm not.
Big East is basically a mid-major conference. Right. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna let you get in and be like, who I like from the mid-major world? UConn. like good take, Sabreena. Really good. But Maggie Dugan is a player that our friend of the show, contributor to the show, we'll have her back eventually. When she is back, Chantel Jennings might be her favorite player in the country. Sabreena, agreed? Or disagree? Certainly
I
up
think
there.
I've always been a bigger Maggie Dugan fan than Chantel, but we're definitely part of the Aaron Roussel hive, that's for sure.
Well, Richmond, again, in elite offense. I look at these mid-majors. You want something that you are elite at, and they were top 15 in offensive rating last year. They were first in effective field goal percentage. They're shooting an incredible percentage from 2, an incredible percentage from 3, and interestingly, they allowed the fewest free throws per game last year. And with Dugan back, again, the best player in the A10, the best mid-major player, I would argue. We're going to see. They have a tough schedule ahead of them. They play Texas, they play Columbia, they play TCU, they play Fairfield, but they're well positioned to challenge themselves and I think have some success.
Okay. This one was tough. And I know people are probably expecting, obviously, I'm going to try and pick an Ivy League team in this mix.
That's why we threw him in here, Zena. That's why we threw him in.
I know. And I wanted to. And, I'm looking at Columbia. I'm looking at Princeton. They've got some players on the mid-major, the player of the year watch list. And it's good. Shout out to Columbia's Riley Rice. Princeton's got Madison St. Rose. They're going to keep building off what they were doing last year, but there was too many departures, I think, for these two teams to have I think, the same splash this season that they had last year. I don't know if the Ivy League is going to have 3 bids to the tournament. But I do think the A10 will. And I was struggling between Richmond, but also George Mason. And mainly because of George Mason's wins against St. Joe's, against Richmond in the tournament. Like, they played incredibly well. They started the season losing 2 games and then went on an 11-game win streak. I don't have enough here for me to say Richmond or George Mason definitively. So I'm gonna have to let that play out, and I don't want to be ignorant about it. But I feel like I'm gonna have to go with you guys on this mid-major watch right now. So Sabreena, I'm gonna turn to you.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way Ben framed this. Like, you want to find a team that's elite at something, and that has like something you can turn to when situations get adverse. And it's funny, like, all the ways he described Maggie Dugan in Richmond. Like, I could do the same thing with Brooklyn Meyer in South Dakota State,
Yep.
right? Like, this is basically mid-major time of year. You look at a lot of these power conference, and they're scheduling some cupcakes. Like, we don't know what we're gonna get out of them until the conference season starts. Like, seriously, if you're trying to figure out what to make of LSU, like, good luck until January. Like, I don't know what exactly you're gonna learn from a lot of these games. But the mid-majors, they schedule really well during non-conference because they're not going to pick up a lot of resume-boosting wins, so to speak, during their conference seasons. And South Dakota State, they start the season off against Creighton, who I've been told is not part of a mid-major conference, even though they're in the Big East. And, they had a nice win at Creighton. And Brooklyn Meyer, she puts up 33 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, like a very Maggie Dugan type stat line, honestly. And this is a South Dakota State team that was the 14th ranked offensive rating in the country last year, 6th in effective field goal percentage, like just an offensive machine. They have gotten to the second weekend of the tournament as recently as 2022, I want to say. So it's not like this is out of the question for this program. I just really like the way they move the ball. Like, I mean, Meyer's just a ridiculous specimen of a player. Like, she's just been putting up numbers like nobody's business ever since she got to South Dakota State. They don't exactly have like the same caliber of schedule as like Richmond. I mean, Richmond's playing Texas the day that this comes out, so like, they're really going for it. But they do get to play North Carolina, Columbia, Kansas State. So there's some opportunities to see what exactly they can come up with. But just for the counterpoint, I think to Richmond, I think like let's see what Brooklyn Meyer and South Dakota State can come up with, because like, again, this is a team that has historically like punched above their weight in non-conference schedule.
Okay. All right. I'm taking your word for it. This is the
But
part of the
I
year,
just scrolled
guys.
down the schedule. Actually, South Dakota State does play Texas this year.
They play them later. They play
Yeah,
them
they
later.
play them a little bit later.
Well, and these these games are so important for these mid-major schools, right? And it comes at a time where, when we get to March, when we're thinking about who's in, who's out, seed lines, these are the games so often that the committee is going to look back on, that we are going to look back on as we evaluate them. They really are high leverage games for these programs in particular, for exactly what Sabreena was saying. These major conference schools, should Texas lose to South Dakota, like, they're going to get another opportunity to still be a high seed because they're playing in the SEC, and they're going to have chances against South Carolina, against LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, etc. But like, especially early season, if you're one of these programs that we're talking about here, you're hoping to, clip and catch one of these major programs on an off night, pick up a critical win, because that can go such a long way come NCAA tournament time in terms of how we all think about and evaluate your program. And maybe you get them when, a team is not playing their best in November, but hopefully for those programs, you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with having played at a mid-major, a lot of these games are being bought by bigger schools to be able to have won the practice, but then a guaranteed win. And whenever you do perform well against a team like this, whether it's a win or a loss, it puts you on the map. But particularly nowadays, especially with the NCAA tournament having the expansion, having the first 4 opportunity, like, mid-majors are not trying to play with their opportunity to potentially be in that conversation. And so they take every game seriously, but these type of games are really important for them. Ben, you mentioned you don't quite get the opportunity to get those quad 1 or quad 2, and we're going to break that down eventually, guys. Don't worry. We'll cover all that later towards March. but those big wins that position you well for seeding in the tournament. Now, I'll say this, when it comes to women's college, it is something for me that I am more of a fan on. Like, of course, I can analyze a basketball game, but in terms of understanding and the different positioning of different teams and how they've played, et cetera, like, I am very excited to be talking to you guys this year about it because I still am, like, catching up after having played. Like, now I'm a fan and I'm getting to enjoy it. And so I'm really excited to get into the mix of this season again with you guys. And we'll see what happens, but let us know what you guys think about our this or that's. If there are other things that you're curious about. If you're a fan like me and you've got more questions, bring them in. Sabreena and Ben will knock it out. So, all right, well, we'll see what happens this season, but this was a fun game of this or that. We'll bring it back throughout the year. Let us know if there's anything that you guys want us to compare and break down. All right, to close things out today, I know I said I was going to leave the pro sports alone. It is college season. However, some new coaches came into their teams and had their introductory press conferences, and they had some thoughts and some comments. And Sabreena and Ben saw them. Of course, we're talking about Sandy Brondello at the Toronto Tempo, Sonia Rahman at the Seattle Storm, and Jose Fernandez at the Dallas Wings. Guys, any takeaways? Anything stood out from these introductory press conferences with these coaches?
I did enjoy that Toronto tried to keep the secret as long as possible. It was like, hey, we're introducing our head coach today with like no name attached to it, as if we didn't all know who it was going to be.
We were well aware.
But Sandy, I mean, we talked about this last week, when the hire was announced, or not announced, but like when it was revealed. Just the word alignment and like the partnership that she feels with Monica Wright-Rogers. We've mentioned they are the only former player combination of coach and GM in the WNBA. And it seems pretty clear that like they see basketball the same way. The way they want to build the team is in concert with one another. And it felt like a lot of shade to her experience in New York, to be frank. But she seems very happy with the partnership that she will have with Monica Wright-Rogers. And, she could have had any job in the WNBA. Like, we've gone through this. She could have coached Paige Bueckers. She could have coached Dom Malonga. She chose to be here. And I think a lot of it is because of who her GM is. And that just really came across in the press conference.
She seemed happy as hell to be in Toronto. You definitely saw that vibe there. And that's great. That's exactly what you want. But to your point, it does feel a little cool in New York after some of those comments.
She's gonna bring, we should say, this is, I don't know if this is out there, but Olaf Lang, her husband, former assistant coach, head coach in Europe, WNBA coach everywhere. He will also be joining her staff with the Toronto Tempo. We can say that. And it was fun I guess it was the only press conference that I've ever heard, Sabreena, in which the Commonwealth of Nations was referred to. I had to Google what other countries were in the Commonwealth of Nations, but Sandy being Australian, now coaching a team in Canada, that came up. That caught my ear, I guess, among other facts.
What about, did you see anything else with Sonia or Jose that stood out?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sonia's was not less jumped out, I guess, and it still is unclear about what that roster is going to look like. I mean, again, we heard a lot about alignment. We heard a lot about evolution. She talked about
they use the word evolvement now, too, which is kind of weird to me. Where did we get the word evolvement from? I thought it was evolution.
It definitely is evolution.
I mean, that also a takeaway, and I think the appeal of Dominique Malonga is a real one. We also saw, much like the case of Sandy going to a Raptors game right after, Sonia then went to a Seattle Kraken game that night. I always love when the recently introduced head coach then goes to another sporting event of a team in the same city. Yeah, gets their jersey, gets their little press tour, like an arena tour. I thought that's really nice. But I did, among the press conference, I think Jose Fernandez's was stood out just because he made it very clear, or he tried to make it very clear, that this is a different era of Dallas Wings basketball. Ooh. Like, he was very clear in saying change is coming and we're going to win. That was a point blank quoted statement that he said. He talked about how other coaches and other people might be afraid or might have been afraid to take this Dallas Wings job, both because of the pressure that it comes with, but also I think underlying the pressure. And when you talk to other people involved in this kind of search or other people around the industry, because of the instability that has come with the Dallas Wings from the coaching side, right? Just the incredible turnover that they have had year after year, not having a coach survive 3 seasons since the mid 2010s. He said he didn't seem to be fazed by that fact, and instead seemed excited and motivated by the opportunity to coach Paige Bueckers, to get to know Paige Bueckers, to get to know the other players on this roster. I don't know. This season, the fact that he has been a seasoned head coach, I think did shine through in how he was responding to questions, how he was conducting himself on the podium. I think that is a really good sign, and it is why, experience was one of the factors that Curt Miller was open about prioritizing throughout this search. Is one thing we reported, and then Curt confirmed on the podium when they were talking about Jose. They wanted someone who had been a proven head coach and had those experiences, and I think that really did shine through as well as he was reflecting on his choice to join the Wings.
And Ben, just to close it out, what tier of the NCAA did he earn that season experience?
Yeah, he was a mid-major coach.
Mid-major
going
coach.
from
Told y'all
South Florida. Exactly.
We're gonna bring it back, people.
Hey, that's why it's all important that we might be talking about, the coach of Richmond and Aaron Johnston of South Dakota now. But in a couple of years, who knows? They might be WNBA head coaches, and you'll be glad you listened to this podcast to learn more about their programs now when we start to talk about their transitions to the pros.
It's funny, I instinctively chuckled when you said a new era of Dallas Wings, because how many times have we heard that in the last 8 years? It comes up a lot. But, yeah. I mean, the fact that he said that he wanted to win is in direct contrast to what Chris Koklana said at this time last year when it was, we want to make sure our players want to rejoin the team at the end of the season. There was no mention of winning when Chris was brought on. So It is different.
Okay. Well, I told y'all we would bring it back somehow. Mid-majors. That's why you got to pay attention. Not just to the top 25. We got to go around the NCAA. And that's what we're going to do for the rest of this college hoop season. It's officially here. And we got to make sure that y'all don't miss any more of these episodes, okay? Can't miss any of these episodes this winter because we're going to be breaking it down. Make sure you're subscribed, not only wherever you're listening on audio, but make sure you see us on video too. We're a good-looking bunch. Go subscribe on YouTube. Make sure your family and your friends are too. Let us know if you guys have more questions. Feel free to hit us up on social media. No offseason at theathletic.com is our email. So right there as well. And go check out our partner, the Yahoo Sports Hub. They've got more content over there for you. sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. And be prepared to give your opinion because we got an audience survey coming. And we're going to drop those in those show notes very soon. So very much be prepared. We want to get feedback on what you guys like, what you guys don't like, what you guys want more of, all of the above. So be prepared for that. But for now, be prepared for women's college hoops because it's here. On behalf of The Athletic, Sabreena Merchant, Ben Pickman, I'm Zena Ogwumike. Thanking you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.